Hey everyone, welcome back to AntLab Games. We are about to kick off the second video in the Assault on Doomrock Doompocalypse playthrough. So this is where we start our combat encounter phase. One real quick item before we jump in. If you watched the first video, we had this Dwarven Keep shop that I had laid out as one of my locations. One thing to note, whenever you have a shop, you're allowed to purchase. So, and it tells you exactly in parentheses how many items and of what type to populate the shop with, specifically, and how much of each of those respective items costs. So for the Dwarven Keep, I should have put out 2 common and 1 epic card drawn randomly from the item deck that I could have purchased from. But since I wasn't planning on purchasing items anyway, it really didn't hurt me or change the impact of the game in any way. But just so you know that that's something that you should do. I should have populated it even if I didn't plan on buying any. But I will do that in every adventuring phase going forward. So real quick down and dirty correction or clarification to the rules. But with that, I think we'll jump in and we'll go to our setup. So when we get to the combat encounter card will give you a layout of how the battlefield should look, and there are certain things we're going to need to do that are randomized for this particular field. So, and we'll go ahead and I'll explain that as well. All right, so this is our battlefield, and it's actually split into 2 fields. So this will be the field where my heroes begin. So I'll move the hero tokens down here, and they can either be separate or together. So in individual groups or in one group. And groups is really the key word for this whole combat system. It's all about groups. So these are dividers. So this is the current field I'm in, and this is the opposite field. And that really only comes into play. Now, combat in this game is very abstract. So it's not like you're going to be tactically moving pieces. So either you're adjacent to something or you're not. Either you're part of this group or you're not. For the purposes of enemy AI, there are heroes when you read down the list, and that's going to represent my tokens, and there are enemies, which are going to represent their tokens, no matter how you read it. So what I do have to do is add 2 main terrain components to this battlefield, and those will be randomly drawn. Now I also do have cover that this scenario has, and it's just a generic rock that can be used. And again, this will all make sense as we combat. And regardless of where this is, it's just in this area. So it all comes down to, like I said, adjacent. So he would be adjacent to that cover or not. And cover will give you some bonuses in combat, and we'll talk about that later as well. So with that said, I've got to draw or randomly pick 2 major terrain pieces. So what I do is I have this terrain deck, and at random I'm just going to shuffle it up and then throw 2 random cards out and see what we get. So we're going to get a Gatling gun and a grappling hook. So I have to find those tokens and add them to the battlefield. Alright, so these items are going to have specific abilities throughout the game that we'll be able to use. So the first one is the grappling hook, and I'll put that where it's telling me. So we'll put 1 here, and we will put 1 down here. So the Gatling gun goes here in relation to where my guys start. So those are the 2. There is also another item that's scenario specific, and this is going to be in every encounter, is going to be the mule, like the pack mule. And he's actually part of our party, and he's there. He carries our stuff, but he also does some pretty interesting things throughout the combat round, so we'll get to see those as well. So he starts out over here with us. The next thing we do is choose a minor random terrain, and I'll explain how that works. So I take all of the major terrain cards that I've picked for this scenario, and we add up, net these 2 numbers together, so we get a +1 and a -1, so we're going to get a 0. So based on the rules, if you have, if that number results in a 0 or less, we get to draw a negative minor terrain card. And the negative minor terrain cards are here. So you see, minor negative. So out of these, I'm going to randomly shuffle. I'm not looking. I'm just going to grab whatever one comes to mind. And there you go. So we're going to have a blood pool. So I'm going to find that token, and that's going to go on the side with our heroes. Alright, so we have a blood pool. So it doesn't matter where it goes. It can go there, that's fine. Over here and go over here. Again, this is abstract, so it just has to represent that it's here. Because when you move in this game, you move. So if I want to move him adjacent to an enemy, I just move him. There's no distance. It's just either you're next to him or you're not. So that's that. Now we can go over real quick what each of these terrain components are going to do during our combat. Okay, so as you can see, we have 4 different terrain types here with all different symbols. So we'll start with the blood pool. So this slippery ground, so that has an exclamation point next to it, right? So and that comes into play, and all of these actions are triggered when somebody is adjacent or like right next to that particular piece of terrain. And there's only 2 ways to do that. One, you can move purposely to be adjacent to it and trigger the action, or it can be the result of the push action or a push result from combat that will push you into a piece of terrain. So the exclamation point, everything is simple. So the exclamation point is passive. So this takes into account at the end of the round if you're next to it or you're adjacent to it. That's how it ends. The bear trap is a hazard symbol, and if you're pushed into the terrain, this is the reaction that happens to you. This is what you would, so in this case you would gain 1 exposed token. This little gear symbol is a hero action. So if you, by using a maneuver action, so you can actually go here and get next to it and activate this particular item. So by activating the Gatling gun, we would flip this card over, so flip this terrain, and then you would have some actions on the back as a result of that. And I will save that for the playthrough when we actually get into combat. So again, like the grappling hook, that's something that my heroes can activate, as well as the mule. And the skull symbol is an enemy action. So if an enemy is adjacent to this type of terrain, the enemy will first perform this action on the terrain, and then move on to his it'll become part of that particular enemy's activation phase, which is never good. So you don't want that to happen. But that's how this is going to work, and really the terrain, how it really is going to come into play is basically they change the effects of the push effect, and push characters now. If you're in combat and you're not adjacent to terrain in combat, you automatically have to go to the lowest priority terrain, and by that I mean every terrain has a number on it. So you would get pushed to the lowest priority, which is that number, unoccupied terrain. So whatever terrain is empty, you would go to the lowest one, and then you would have to suffer whatever effects they have. Or you could on a subsequent turn go in and actually take actions against that. And the same as it goes with you pushing monsters. They're going to get pushed to the different terrain types, so you can kind of use that to your advantage. But we'll get to see that as we go through this combat playthrough, and I think that's about it, down and dirty. So we'll go through in more detail, and then we'll break down the combat, and I think we should get this playthrough started. So let's get to it. Okay, the first part of battle is called the roll phase. The roll phase is not part of the combat round, but it happens before every combat round, where you roll all of your heroes' dice and assign each of them to an action with a corresponding die face. So this is how we basically queue up our moves for the combat round. So just simply roll the dice and then start assigning. And we're going to get 2 re-rolls of as many dice that we want to re-roll as necessary. So you just assign them to whatever matches with whatever move you think you want to do that particular round. So I know I want to do that. Maybe I'll do a command. and I've got one more 6. So I'd like to get a maneuver. So you've got your moves, right? So each move is kind of really is different, obviously, right? So you've got maneuver and rush in are both movement. This one's an attack. The whiplash command is actually a manipulation one where I can move somebody else. Shatter is a great attack. It's just I need to have the enemies adjacent to terrain. So I don't think right now nobody's adjacent to terrain. So I don't think I'm going to be able to use that the first round. So I'm going to pass with that. With this 6 here, though, I think I'm going to trade this in. So what you could do with any 1s and 6s are exchange them for either a shield or heroism. So a 1 would get me a shield and a 6 would get me a heroism. So I'm going to trade that in for 1 heroism token. Alright, so we will do the same for our bard. And see what we get. So we've got a 6, so we'll give her the solo. Give her headbang. Actually, we had a good roll. We'll do 2 headbangs, a solo, and a maneuver. Now, I didn't have to use, or get to use, my passive ability based on my trait, which if I were able to match, during my rolls I were able to match these 2 dice rolls. So a 4 and a 2, that would have allowed me to re-roll a single die up to 3 times. With the commander, I would have been able to make one of my abilities initiative enabled, and I'll explain what that means in just a moment. Okay, so now we're going to start the combat round, but before we do, I want to just note some special rules for these armored skeletons based on the encounter card. So they have 2 abilities, passive. So the shield wall, each skeleton who normally has an armor of 1 has an armor equal to the number of skeletons in his group, including himself. So if there are 2 skeletons in a group, they each have 2 armor. If there's 3, they each have 3. If there's 1, he only has 1. So I want to get them alone, obviously. And also, after a skeleton was attacked, but if I don't do any damage, I push the skeleton instead. So we have to keep that in mind. Another thing to note is with our commander, because she's impatient, after moving, if she moves adjacent to enemies, she's going to gain 1 exposed. So that's a negative. I'm going to have to remember to do that. And what I'm also doing is I'm looking at all of my characters and heroes and terrain cards to make sure there's no start of round abilities that trigger, and I don't believe there are. Okay, well actually there is. So the bard has a start of round ability where she gains 1 expose if I have no 6 result assigned to cards. And as you saw for my solo, I assigned a 6 die, so she does not gain that expose marker. So that's good. So I always want to roll a 6 with her. Okay, so now we enter the initiative phase, and this allows us to use actions that have the initiative enabled symbol, and our commander has one. So if you notice that lightning bolt next to the die face there means that this can be used during this round. So I can use it now before the minions go, or I can use it later during my activation phase. So I'm going to use it now because it can only be used if you're not engaged. So if I have an enemy on me, then I can't use this. So this is her only way of moving, so I'm going to have her rush in now. Okay, so for her rush in, and I think it's probably a good idea to explain a few things about the way the game mechanics work. So in this game, it's just a few things to keep in mind. Distance is irrelevant. Either you're adjacent or you're not. So if you're next to something, you're adjacent. If you're next to a group, you're adjacent to everybody in that group, and they're adjacent to you, and you're also engaged. So all your minions and all your heroes are. So this is a group of 1, but it's a group, like an empty group. If they were together, they would be considered a group, but they're not, and they're not adjacent to each other. So those are the key words here. So with rush in, I have to choose an enemy group, and it could be any enemy, even if it was just 1 enemy. That would be an empty enemy group. But I want to go here, so I'm going to engage them. And now, because of my rush in ability, each of them gains expose, but also because of my impatient trait, I gain an additional expose token for myself. So now I'm engaged with them. I'm adjacent to them, and even though I'm only touching 2, I'm actually touching all of them, and they're all touching me. So we're all adjacent to each other. That's what you just need to keep in mind in this game. Whether your attack says adjacent, you have to be adjacent. If it just says you deal damage, then it's considered ranged. But that's it, down and dirty. That's all I wanted to do. That was my one action for initiative phase. And the reason you want to get initiative actions in is because the enemy is going to get the first set of activations before we do. So they always strike first. So you want to get what moves you can in to prep to take whatever damage you're going to take, so that you can do your actions, or kind of set things up so that you're in a position to do the most damage, when you get to take your action. So let's go into the minion activation phase and we'll see how that works. Okay, so now we are on the minion activation round, and for minion activation we have a minion deck that's going to give us the AI for each minion we activate, and we have to activate 2 skeletons for each hero. So, and they'll go one at a time. So we'll start with the hero who has the highest threat, which is our commander, who has 7 versus the bard 6. So what I have to do is I just have to choose which minion I want to activate. And I usually mark them with one of these tokens just so I know who I've activated, because you can't activate the same one over and over again. But what I'll do is I'll probably go ahead and activate some of the ones I'm with. Alright, so she'll activate that one. And I just have to activate 2 of them. Alright, so if we look at the card, it's going to tell us exactly what to do. So, unless engaged, move to an active hero. And we know they're already engaged. And if you move, you gain 2 shields. So this enemy did not move, so it doesn't gain 2 shields. Deal 1 damage and push the active hero. Okay, so he's going to deal 1 damage. So we have to first reveal our exposed token. So these are both push symbols, and you can only suffer the effects of push once, and because push is also part of the attack, we're going to suffer that. But I also have to take 1 damage, but I have 3 shield tokens, so I will discard 1 to negate that damage. But now I have to get pushed. So the way push works is you are pushed to the lowest priority terrain that's unoccupied. If that makes sense to you. So you look at the priority number on the terrains that are all open, and she is going to get pushed to the one with the lowest priority, which would be the donkey, who's unoccupied. So now he's occupied. So the next person who gets pushed, whether it's an enemy or a minion or a hero, is going to go to the blood pool, because that's the next lowest that's unoccupied, and then they'll go to the grappling hook, and then the Gatling gun, and then the cover. Alright? So the last action is deal 1 damage and push adjacent highest threat. So if the bard, for example, was also part of this group, she would have taken the damage and been pushed as well. But since that wasn't the case, this enemy activation is now over. Alright, so for the commander's second activation, I think what she'll do is activate him, and we'll see what that does. Alright, so we draw the card, and each skeleton not adjacent to another skeleton, when in this case they say it's an enemy, but in this game, if it says enemy, it means an enemy. An enemy, not an enemy. An enemy is a skeleton for the purposes of this combat, so we'll keep that in mind. So each skeleton not adjacent to another skeleton moves adjacent to this skeleton. So basically any single skeleton out here would now move over and join this group, the skeleton as a group, right? So that's not the case. Move this skeleton and up to 2 adjacent skeletons to the active hero. So there's only 1 adjacent skeleton, so they're both going to move down here. Now all 3 of them are technically adjacent to the mule and each other, right? So now they're all one big grouping. And then he's going to deal 1 damage to the active hero. And the active hero has 1 more shield, so she will discard that, and that is the end of her activation. So now we have to do for the bard. Okay, so for the bard, what I think I'll do is activate this exposed group up here, at least one of them at a time. So I'll activate this guy in the back, and we'll see what he has to do. So each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy, again, to another skeleton, moves adjacent. Then each moved skeleton gains one exposed. So if I had a single skeleton, he would move into this group, and then he would gain expose. And now they're going to darken the sky, so I'm assuming that means they're shooting like arrows at us. And we're going to deal 2 party damage. So what I'll do is I'll take 1 to each of my heroes. I can allocate that any way I want. 1 to each hero, and they'll each discard a shield to negate it, so they won't take any damage from this. So that was the first activation, which was pretty harmless. And for her final, she'll activate him. And now I know I've got my 4 activation tokens. I know they've all been activated for this round. Each skeleton not adjacent to another skeleton moves adjacent to this one. So it's all about getting them back into groups, right? That's because they want to stay together, the skeletons. That's the AI's intent. Because they each, obviously, the more they have in their group, the stronger they are. Their armor is much higher. So it's going to be harder for me to damage them. Move this skeleton up to 2 adjacent skeletons to the active hero. So this whole group is going to come down and get adjacent to our bard, so they want to hit her. So then they're going to deal 1 damage. So I just have to flip over her expose, and it is a refresh token. So whenever you draw one of these, you would separate this and all of the blank ones we've drawn, and then shuffle back all of the non-blanks into the pile of exposed tokens. So I'll do all that. That's all settled. So her activation. It's not done. She just has to take 1 damage, but she has a shield, so she's good. No damage. Enemy activation is now over, so I can remove these tokens, and we actually get to do our attacks now, which is the good part. Alright, so for my first action, I am going to command, and I can move a distant character adjacent to yourself. So what my commander is going to do is she is going to use her whip and yank the bard out of that group and pull her adjacent. Alright, so now I've got the 2 of them over here dealing with these guys. So now I can start doing some attacks. So what I think I'll do first is do a whiplash, and I'm going to use 1 heroism. And the normal attack is deal 1 damage to up to 2 adjacent characters, ignoring 1 armor. So now she's going to deal 2 damage and ignoring 1 armor. So they each have 2 armor. She's going to ignore it, so they each have 1 armor, and they're going to take 2 damage. So only 1 will go through, but that definitely weakens them a bit. Alright. What I'm going to do next is use my bard. And what she's got is headbang, and I can deal 1 damage to adjacent character, ignoring all push effects, and then I can move it to a distant group after the attack. Alright, so she'll spend 1 of her actions. Do I want to do that? I think I do, but I just don't want to kick him out of this group just yet. I'd like to hurt him a little bit more if I can. So what I'll do instead is I'm going to use my maneuver, my bard's maneuver, and that's going to give me a heroism token, right? So what I'm going to do is also I'm going to use my now I'm going to do headbang, and this heroism token charges it for 1 extra damage. So now it's going to deal 3 damage to an adjacent character, ignoring all push effects. So he's got 2 armor, so he's going to get knocked down to 1 because I did 3 damage. It hits him for 1, and then she's going to push him to another group. So now it's just them, and he's got only 1 armor now. So now I'm going to use my solo, and what the solo does is deals 1 damage to a character, target, and they gain 1 expose before or after the attack. So I'll have him gain the expose after the attack, so it's going to deal only 1 damage, but it's going to give him an expose token. So now I'm going to use Headbang, which will deal 2 damage to the enemy. So she's going to deal 2 to him. That's a blank, but he still takes 1 damage. And I'm going to use... Let's see. Alright, so I can use Whiplash. And Whiplash deals 1 damage, ignoring 1 armor. So he's dead. And Whiplash says you could deal it up to 2 characters. So that, to me, that means I can deal it to 1 or 2 characters. So, with 2 being the max. So that works for me. So he's dead. And that's really what I wanted to get accomplished this round. Was to at least kill one of them and hurt one of them. So now we finish hero activation, we end the round, and by ending the round we discard any leftover shield and heroism tokens from all characters, and we check for end of round effects. Alright, no end of round effects, so let's go ahead and get rolling. So we've got another Whiplash, we've got a maneuver that I want, a command that I want. Do I want to rush in? No, I think I'm going to reroll these 2. I got a 1 and a 2. I don't know if I necessarily want rush in this round, so I'm going to keep the 1 off to the side and we'll reroll this one. It's a 3. So with a 3, I can give myself another maneuver, I think. And this 1 I'm going to trade in for a shield token. And now let's roll for our Bard. Alright, so our Bard has got some pretty high numbers here. So we've got a 4 for Headbang. Probably want to do that twice. A 5 and a 4, I don't want those. 5 and a 3, I want the 3. I'd like to get a 6 here, and I got a 6. Alright, solo. So now I don't have to worry about my gaining an exposed, since if I don't have a 6, so that worked out well. Alright, now we go back to any initiatives I want to do, and then start a round. Alright, there's no initiative moves I want to do, so I'll jump right into the minion activation. So, let's see, who do I want to start with first? So, you know I have to use the commander rather. So I think I'm going to start with this guy here, the weakened one. He's only got 1 hit point left. And it says each skeleton not adjacent to another skeleton moves. Move the skeleton up to 2 adjacent. Move this skeleton and up to 2 adjacent skeletons to the active hero. So him, him, and him are going to move in adjacent. And deal 1 damage to the active hero. So I have 1 shield. We'll use that to negate it. And then we move on to the next activation. And she will probably... who do we want to activate? I guess I'll activate the guy next to him. And we get... each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy deals 1 damage to an adjacent hero, so he's the only one that fits this category, and there are no adjacent heroes. Each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy moves adjacent to this skeleton, so any other separates would come together. And then each hero not adjacent to another hero gains 1 expose, and we are adjacent, so we don't gain any expose. So I have to shuffle up the deck because it's full. We went through the whole thing, and we get to start with our Bard. Let's see how she fares. So we've got each skeleton not adjacent. I'm sorry, I'm going to go after the 3rd one in this group. So each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy moves adjacent to this skeleton. So that'll happen. Alright, so now move this skeleton and up to 2 adjacent skeletons to the active hero. So all 4 of these guys are up on us now and deal 1 damage to the adjacent hero. So she's going to deal 1 damage to our Bard. Bard doesn't have anything to negate that, so she's going to take it. Last activation is going to be this guy, clearly. And we've got each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy. Now move the skeleton up to the active hero and deal 1 damage. So she's going to take 2. So she's down 2 health. So not good. I should have probably tried to get some shield tokens that round, but what are you going to do? You're going to take damage at some point. So, with that said, I think it is time for us to make our move. So let me think about what I want to do here. Alright, one thing I gotta fix before we move on to our attack is when the commander first activated one of these skeletons on her in this grouping, that should have triggered an effect on the mule, which would have given each of my characters an exposed token, and then the mule would have fled to its own group, so it separates. But then they attacked and did damage, so if they're damaged, I'll take the damage. If they're pushed, then we'll resolve. So no damage, and one of these reset tokens. So I made out lucky there. So I'm gonna shuffle this one back into the pile, and then that's it. So now they're kind of on their own. They're not part of this terrain, so they're separated. So that's definitely gonna affect how my next move goes. Okay, so now I think it would be a good time for our bard to use the black hole potion. So what that's going to do is move all characters from up to 2 groups to an empty group. So we are going to basically pull everybody apart. It doesn't matter where they go. So now everybody's separate, nobody's adjacent anymore, and now we're ready to roll. Alright, so what I think I'll do is I will maneuver first. So I'm going to use one of the commander's maneuver actions and maneuver adjacent to this grappling hook and then activate it. And what that does, it performs drag. So move a distant character adjacent to yourself. So I'll bring this guy over. And actually, you know what? I'm not going to bring that guy over. I'm going to bring this guy over. Okay, so now he's adjacent. And he gains 1 exposed token. So we'll give him 1 expose. Then for my next move, I'm going to use command. And command lets me move a distant character adjacent to yourself. So I'm going to pull him over as well. So now I've got 2, and they've each got 2 armor. So now I'm going to use my maneuver ability to earn myself heroism. That's one of my options. Now I'm going to spend that heroism and use whiplash. So now I'm going to deal 2 damage to up to 2 characters, ignoring 1 armor. So they only have 1 armor each now, and I'm going to deal, so 1 damage will go through. So he's going to die, and I have to apply 1 damage to him. So he's got a blank and a push. He takes 1 damage, and he gets pushed to the donkey. The mule, whatever you want to call him. Alright, so that's that. And we can now go to our bard. So she's got a maneuver, so I can move in and attack. I also have a solo, which is a ranged attack. So if I use solo, that'll deal 1 damage to a target, or I could boost it for 2 damage and 2 expose. That might be worth my while. 2 damage and 2 exposed tokens. Should I do that? But headbang I won't be able to move, that's the problem. I won't be able to use, and I have 2 of those. So I think what I'll do is I'll maneuver her. Maneuver her and get her, let's go after this guy. And then I'm going to do a headbang, or should I do a solo? So if I do solo, it deals 1 damage and will give him an exposed token. So let's give him an exposed token. I could do that before or after my attack, but I'll give it to him now, and then we'll do 1 damage to him. And he's got 1 armor, so blank and a push, and these guys are getting off easy. And he's going to go to the blood pool, which is going to give him, well, that kind of sucked. That really sucked, which is going to give him 1 expose for hitting it. So we'll give him the exposed token. But now she's all alone, right? and her only moves are headbang, and they have to be adjacent. So she probably could have killed him, but he got away. So we're going to lose those two moves and basically start our next turn. So let's see what happens. Alright, so we roll the dice. And what do we get? So we got 6. I'm going to try Shatter this time, I think. Command seems to be working out well for me. I'm going to keep one of these 1s because I'd like the shield token. Whiplash is nice, and Maneuver. Those are 3. And this will be a shield token. So that's it for my commander. So our bard definitely needs some shield tokens. But we're not going to get them, but we do get our solo. We get a maneuver, we want that for sure. We want our headbang, but if I can get a shield token, that's a 5 and a 2. Can I even use a 2? I can't even use a 2. Well, I got a 2 and a 4 though. So I may re-roll a single die up to 3 times. So let's see if we can do it here. 2, 4, do I keep it? I think I keep it. Alright, so I'm probably going to take some more damage this round, but I don't want to press my luck any further. So let's jump into the activation. Alright, first up we have our commander. So where are you, commander? Alright, so commander's here, and we need to do activation. So remember, I have the option to do an initiative enabled move, but I'm not going to do that. So what we're going to do is activate. So I'd like to activate some of these hurt ones, I think, if at all possible. Well, not hurt ones, but I'd like to activate him. But what he's going to do is he's going to give... He'll basically give all of us an exposed token if I activate him. So I could get away without activating him. And I think that's probably the best bet. I just should go in and deal with him. So let me start with activating these guys. So I'll start with this guy up here. And unless engaged, moved to the active hero. Alright. If moved, gain 2 shields. Well, that's not good. And deal 1 damage and push the active hero. So she's going to deal 1 damage, but I'm going to shield it. And she's going to push me. He's going to push me, and I'm going to move to the next lowest terrain, unoccupied. So she moves over to the Gatling gun. That may not be a terrible thing. So that's it. Then deal 1 damage and push the adjacent highest threat, which there are none. So we move on. Oops! Before I draw it, I want to pick another activation. So we'll go with him. And we get each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy moves adjacent to this skeleton. So each skeleton not adjacent to another skeleton. So this is called regroup. And that's basically everybody. What did I drop? His exposed token. Alright, so they all pull back together, which is not what I wanted to see. Now move the skeleton and up to 2 to the active hero. So that was this guy. And up to 2 more. So let's move him. And let's move him. Right next to my commander, and then deal 1 damage. So she's going to take 1. But that's the end of her activation. And we will now activate the bard. So the bard is going to activate this guy. Remember, these guys are all together in a group. And he says, each skeleton not adjacent to another one moves to him. Each move gains an exposed. Nope, so deal 2 party damage. So they'll each take 1. And then the final activation is going to be him. Do I want it to be him? I think I do. I can activate this little one now. let's do that. Each skeleton not adjacent to another skeleton deals 1 damage, so there's none alone. Each skeleton not adjacent to another skeleton moves adjacent to this skeleton. Each hero not adjacent to another hero gains 1 exposed, so we each get an exposed token. Okay. Alright, that's it. So we survived another activation round. I'll have to shuffle these up. And we now get to do hero actions. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to activate or use my rogue armor. And what that does is you are not considered surrounded until the end of the turn. And the reason I'm doing that is because she is currently surrounded. So that armor is going to allow me to not be so that I can move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my maneuver. And I'm going to maneuver her over to the mule and activate the mule. And the activation on terrain can be done as part of your maneuver. And the mule activation is I move the mule to a distant group and move the mule to a distant enemy group, and each enemy adjacent to the mule gains 1 exposed. So they're each going to gain an exposed token. 1, 2, 3. And now I'm going to use shatter, and I'm going to shatter this. So each target on the distant terrain, all enemies adjacent to the targeted terrain are dealt 2 damage, ignoring 1 armor. So they're each dealt 2 damage, and we're going to ignore 1. Actually, before I do that, maybe I'm going to pull one of these guys out. Right? So I'm going to use command first, and that's going to move a distant character adjacent to myself. So I'm going to whip this guy. Maybe I want to whip this guy out. Yeah, I'm going to pull him over here because I want them to have less armor, right? And now I'll use shatter. So I'm going to deal 2 damage, ignoring 1 armor. So they're each going to automatically take 1 damage regardless. Alright, so this guy gets pushed. He's going to take 1 damage, and he's going to get pushed to the next lowest terrain, which is this. And he's going to gain an exposed token. This guy's going to take 1 damage. And that's it. Alright, so he's adjacent to 2 of these right now. Now I have whiplash. So I can use that on him and deal 1 damage, ignoring 1 armor. So it's going to do 2 damage, ignoring 1 armor. So that's going to deal 1 damage to him, and it's going to push him. And he's going to get pushed to the grappling hook. And that's pretty much it for my commander. So now with my bard I can go in and try to end some of these guys. So I like to end him if at all possible. So let me try first my solo. Deal 1 damage to a character. Target gains exposed before or after the attack. So if I do 1 attack here, I'm going to give him an exposed token, and we'll see if I can do 1 damage to him. Plus 1, that's what I wanted to see. So I actually do 2 damage, 1 goes through, he dies. That's what I was hoping. Alright, because the solo is a ranged attack. And now I can move adjacent to him with my maneuver, and I can do a headbang, which is deal 2 damage to adjacent character, ignoring all push effects. So deal 2 damage, 1 goes through, and I'm going to use it twice. Again, he's dead. So back down to these terrains. So I'm technically adjacent to both of these, which is kind of weird, but I don't think the donkey made much sense. So I'll be, well, I guess I'll go to the lowest. We'll keep with the rules. The lowest unoccupied, so I'll be with the donkey. Really doesn't matter because I think we had a really good round that time. But let's roll and see what happens next. All right, back to the roll. We're almost there, guys. Don't think I'm going to use shatter this time. So whiplash, command, maneuver, shield. 633. So now one of my abilities becomes initiative enabled. That's pretty cool. So I could technically do something, but I don't think I need to do something. Let me roll this one more time. I roll a 6. Shatter. 2 damage and on 1 armor. I think I'm gonna initiative enable my shatter. Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. Trade that in for a shield token. Alright. I'm down with that. Yeah, I think I like that. Okay. Alright. Bard. What are we gonna do? Wow, a whole lot of ones. Okay, so I'm definitely gonna take, I should take 2 of those for shields, right? Let's headbanger. Maybe just 1. Bunch of 2s, you kidding me? Oop. 6 and a 4. 6. 4. Well, I had a 2, and now I have a 4, so I've rolled a 2 and a 4, so I'm going to get to roll these 3 times. I think as long as I roll that combination at some point. What the frick? Alright, 2 shields then. I guess that's what I'm getting. I'm not going to complain too much, I just have no maneuver. But maybe I can use my commander to manipulate that. Alright, let's go into initiative round. Alright, so I'm going to use my shatter, because I made that initiative enabled. So that's going to blow up this terrain, target it, and it's going to deal 2 damage, ignoring 1 armor. So 1 damage. That just weakens him even more. And I don't have to worry about manipulating people near a distant terrain, so that works for me. But now we jump into minion activation, starting with our commander. These guys' shields at the end of the round went away, so he no longer has them. So let's get that resolved, and now we will activate, I think. Let's activate you, buddy. No, let's activate this lone wolf. Get him, into the party. So unless engaged, move to the active hero, okay? If moved, gain 2 shields. Well, that kind of stunk, because he's going to be protected next round. Deal 1 damage to the adjacent active hero. Blank. Deal 1 damage and push the adjacent active hero. So I'm going to use a shield to block the damage, and she's going to push me, or he's going to push me. And I'm going to go to this blood pool and gain an exposed token. Alright. So that's first activation. Second activation is going to be this guy with the expose. And each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy moves adjacent to the skeleton. So where is he? Is this? Yeah. So this goes here. Move the skeleton and up to 2 skeletons to the active hero. So he's going to go to the active hero. He's going to go to the active hero. And he's going to go to the active hero. And because they all came to the blood pool, they're all going to get an exposed token. I'm thinking, right? I would think. Let me double check that. I don't know if they have to be pushed. No, yeah, characters that are pushed, they do not suffer the hazard effect. Okay. Alright, so they all move up, and then deal 1 damage to the active hero. So we expose +1, so our hero is going to take 2 damage. Wow, that hurt my commander pretty bad. Actually, she's down to 2 health. But her activation's over. Let's jump into our Bard activation. She's going to activate this one. And we get each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy deals, not adjacent to another skeleton, deals 1 damage to an adjacent hero. Each skeleton not adjacent to another skeleton moves adjacent to this skeleton. Now, and each hero not adjacent to another hero gains 1 expose. So we're going to gain 1 expose. Alright. And that's it for his activation. And then we have the final one, which is each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy moves adjacent to this skeleton. So he moves over. Each moved skeleton gains 1 expose. and deal 2 party damage. Ooh, wow. Okay. I'm going to take it all to the bard and soak it up with my shields. Thank God. Alright, so now we're done. That was ugly. Hero actions. Alright, starting with my commander, I'm gonna use my armor again, so I can use that every round, so that I can move. So I'm gonna use my maneuver ability. I'm gonna slip out of this group and move over to this terrain and activate this terrain. So these guys are still adjacent to this blood pool. So I'm going to activate this terrain, and that'll allow me to move a distant character adjacent to me, and then give them an expose token. So I'll pull him out with the grappling hook, give him 1 expose. And now, what I can do is I can use command, and I'm going to pull my bard over here as well. And now I'm going to use whiplash and deal 1 damage to up to 2 adjacent characters, ignoring 1 armor. So doing 1 damage to him, ignoring 1 armor. He only has 1 armor, so he's going to take 1 damage plus 1, 2 damage. So 1 damage, 2 damage. Alright. And now my bard will headbang, dealing 2 damage to an adjacent character, which 1 armor will negate and the other will hit. So he's dead. So we've successfully killed him. All she has left is solo, and I can play that because it's ranged. So deal 1 damage to a character. Target gains an expose before or after. So I will give him an expose first. I will expose it, do 1 damage to him, and it's a push. So my damage gets blocked, but he gets pushed out of here and to my donkey. So it's probably not a good sign, but there's only 3 left. I think that's not bad. So let's go back 1 more round. Alright, let's roll her up, refresh her armor. Oops, I'll roll that too. 6, what do we want? Shatter. Shatter works so good. And look, I rolled a 6-3-3, so I'm also going to make Shatter a initiative enabled move, and I'm going to take those 2 shield tokens off that enemy because the round is over. So remember, Shatter is initiative enabled. I'm going to give her a maneuver. I'm going to give her a whiplash. I'm going to re-roll these 2. Oops, I got 2 3s. What do I want to do? I'm going to re-roll them. So we've got a 4 and a 2. So my 4 will be command. And I'm going to use my potion of might, which will roll 3 extra dice. So I'm going to get to roll 3 more times. Because I don't want a 2. I want a shield. 3. A 6. Let me make that a heroism. She might die this round, but you know what? We got to go out swinging, I think. Alright. So let us move on to our bard. I need the bard to deliver big this round. Alright, so we've got a solo. We've got a maneuver this time. I can do a couple of solos. Solo is not initiative enabled though. So there's a 6 and a 5. I can do it my 5. I don't need either of those. 4 and a 3. Can I use that? Yeah, so a headbang and another maneuver, I think. And headbang is initiative, but she's not on anybody, so we don't have to worry about that. But that's it. No shields for anybody. This could be ugly. Let's move into the initiative round. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shatter the blood pool. All enemies adjacent to the target terrain are dealt 2 damage, ignoring 1 armor. So they're each going to have 1 armor. He gets pushed, so 1 damage is going to go through. So he's going to die, actually. And he's going to take 1 damage. And so he never got pushed. But he took damage. And characters adjacent to the blood pool become pushed after being dealt damage. So he was dealt damage, so he gets blown away and he goes to the Gatling gun. So that was a pretty good move, actually. And do I want to do any other initiative enables? I don't think so. So there's only 3 2 enemies left. Wow, okay. So just our commander is going to get to activate, but our bard will have to still activate one. Alright, because there'll be a rampaging enemy. Let's try this out now. Alright, what we don't want to see is our commander dying, so let's start with our first activation of this guy. It really doesn't matter. Each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy moves adjacent to this skeleton. Move this skeleton up to 2 adjacent to the active hero. So we're going up to our commander and deal 1 damage. +1. So they're going to deal 2 damage to her and she's knocked out. That's all she had left. Second activation. Now it's the bard activation. Each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy moves adjacent to the skeleton. Move the skeleton up to 2 adjacent skeletons. Active hero, deal 1 damage to the hero. And it is no additional. So she takes 1 damage and she gets pushed. And she gets pushed to the mule. These guys are here. Now, since she activated one of them here, he steals 1 of my die. And I guess he could steal my maneuver. What does it say? Steal a random die? Steal 1 die from active hero. So I'll give him my maneuver die. I guess maneuver die. That's not really what I wanted, but okay. So whatevs. Damn, maybe on my solo die? Maybe I'll give up my solo die. Yeah, not my maneuver. I'll give up my solo. So he stole 1 of my die. What am I going to do now? Alright, so actually I changed my mind. I'm going to have them steal headbang instead of solo. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use both of my maneuvers to get 2 heroism tokens. And I'm going to use them both on my solo. And the solo is going to deal 1 plus 2 damage. So I'm going to do 3 damage and 3 exposed markers to him. 3 exposed markers. 1, 2, 3, and 3 damage. So he's got 3 shields. Well, 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 damage minus 2 armor is 2 damage. 1, 2. He's dead. That was what I wanted. I wanted to kill him. So I ignore all these pushes. And all that's left is this guy. So let's move into the next round. This is bad. Alright, so one-on-one battle with my bard, and she's definitely not my damage dealer by any chance. Alright, so I've got a solo, and I definitely want to re-roll these. Man, this is tough. Okay. Maneuver. 4, so I did have a 4. 6 and a 1. Alright, I'm going to trade those in for a shield and a heroism. We got to go out. Alright, so let's see what he does. Alright, 1 activation. What is he going to do? Now, I activated him here. He's going to steal 1 of my dice, so he's going to probably steal my... I'll have him steal my maneuver die. Which sucks, but each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy deals 1 damage to each adjacent hero. Each skeleton not adjacent to an enemy moves adjacent to the skeleton. Each hero not adjacent to another hero gains 1 exposed. So I'm going to gain 1 exposed. But I probably... What did I have him take? My maneuver die? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Fair enough. That's actually the best outcome I could have asked for. So what I'm going to do now, it's my turn. I'm going to trade in 1 of my heroisms and boost up my solo. I wanted to boost it twice though, so I get 2 expose and 2 damage. So let's throw 2 exposed tokens on him, and we're going to do 2 damage. He only has 1 armor. 1, 2. Wow. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4 damage against 1 armor, does 3 damage. So it's 1, 2, 3. Wow, a fully charged solo to end the combat. Down to the wire. So, basically, if at least one of your heroes survives, you win the encounter. So let me clean this up and let's do a recap of what we've done. Okay, so our commander comes back with 1 health. So she is revived by our surviving bard. And we now get to collect our reward for defeating the first encounter. So we get 1 silver per player, so that's 2 silver. So we get now we have 4 silver. We get an epic item, heroism +1, loot +2, and loot +1. So let's do some loot rolls. All right, so let's see. We got our silver. I'll collect my heroism, 1 each. We get an epic item, so let's draw from the epic item deck. And what do we get? A lightsaber stick thingy. All right, looks like a lightsaber. Ignore all armor during a melee attack. You may not deal more than 1 damage to each target with this attack. Or attack dealing 2 damage to a character ignoring 1 armor. That's actually quite nice. So I'm going to, what does it take? 2 agility and 1 strength? Ooh. 2 agility, 1 strength. I don't have anybody who can use that yet, but that will go in our party inventory for now, and we'll see about that later. We also get a loot +2 and a loot +1. So loot +2 roll, 6, 7, 8 is an epic item plus a silver. Wow, okay, we'll take my silver. Draw another epic item. What do we get? The Omega armor. So this requires 2 strength and 1 intelligence. Man, I don't even know if I can use this either. I can't. Gain 1 shield, ignore gaining up to 2 exposed markers. Wow. You and each adjacent character ignore gaining 1 exposed marker. This is really good. So I got some pretty good items in my inventory. Last is a loot roll +1. And we roll a 2, +1 is 3. That's another silver. So sometimes it's good to be silver. So I've got 6 silver here. That's enough to level up my bard, I think, once we go to camp. But we will do all of that in the next episode where we begin our next adventuring phase. So, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the combat in this game. I hope I got at least 90+% of the rules right on that. May have had some missteps, but I don't think anything critical enough to have any long-term effects on the outcome of this game. So, with that, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next episode.